Welcome back to the Garden of Glass podcast presented by the Hope Farm. I'm your host, Bentley Evans. Today's episode is going to be all about cocktails, Garden of Glass cocktails in particular, and the bar program here at the Hope Farm. My guests today are Danny and Raliegh and Raleigh Swan. They are both part of our bar team that's super talented. Shout out to Ian, Maddie B, Lane, and Paige. They're here, and we're going to talk about some fun stuff. So, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
So I kind of want to first dive in and get y'all to kind of talk about your experience in the industry, kind of what brought you to this point in your career.
Get it, Danny.
All right. Well, I guess restaurants are kind of always been a part of my life. My dad is a restaurant owner in California, and so I spent most of my summers out there, working either in the back of line as a prep cook or as a line cook, and then eventually kind of worked my way up to the front of house. Saw that I kind of enjoyed that more, working as a server, manager, like all that front of house aspect of it. But they were real big on the margaritas at his restaurant, so that's kind of like my segue into cocktails, as far as, flavor and complexity is concerned. In my early 20s, I was just drinking to get drunk. And then, I started seeing some really cool cocktail programs in Denver and California in particular. And that kind of showed me that it's not just the booze. There's a lot more going on there. And, me being a history buff, I kind of went all in and started seeking that. But, worked in the industry for several years as a server, and then kind of segued into bartending just because of that historical aspect. And, who doesn't like bartending?
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Raleigh?
I kind of got started in my early 20s. I was actually 20 years old, and I had the classic fine dining upbringing. I applied originally for back of house, and this place called Spagio, owned by Hubert and Helga Seifert. Shout out to them. They took one look at me and my blonde hair, and they're like, no, front of the house. So classic fine dining upbringing is you start as a porter. All you do is polish glasses for 6 hours.
Oh, wow.
And then you reset the restaurant. And then you get to be a busser. You're resetting tables. They let you in the dining room on a leash. And then you get to be a back server. You are following the server, resetting tables for different courses. None of those positions involve talking to guests.
Right.
And then you get to be an AM server. Okay. Then you get to be a PM server. And I went through all those positions, finally to PM bartender, dinner bartender. I knew absolutely nothing about bartending. I just think that the managers above me saw me kind of going through all the positions. They're like, well, bartending's next. Might as well do it.
Right.
So that was it took me 2 years to go through all those positions. 22 years old, fine dining bartender. I knew how to make an old fashioned and a Manhattan, and that's about it. And a martini, maybe. And then I found this old bar book, this old bar manual behind the bar. It had been there for 20 years, and I started reading it. And I was just like, oh my God, there's a way to do this.
Right.
There's a way to learn about this stuff. And it was kind of crazy. And so that's how I got started. And so gradually gaining more knowledge in my 20s. I ended up at the Grand Hotel for 3.5 years. Again, starting as a bartender, and then I started running their bars there. So the 1847 bar,
right.
Bucky's Lounge, a lot of event bars we had there as well, and the pool bar. So a lot of moving pieces, and that taught me the whole other aspect of running bars in terms of inventory, talking to vendors, distributors, and reps. I heard about this place's opening while I was managing there. Took one visit here, a walk around, and I was sold. On the concept, on just the grandeur of the building. It's pretty incredible, and it's definitely stayed that way for me. Yeah. I still walk the property, and I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah, the tour definitely sold me.
Yeah, I think obviously getting people like y'all as part of this too kind of just took it from the potential it had and actually achieved that potential. So we're happy to have y'all as a part of the team.
I think we're still trying to figure out the full potential of this.
Yeah, for sure.
What we can do is just
given our circumstances that first year in particular, I feel like this is kind of our true first year. People are starting to come out, Slightly post-COVID, well, during COVID rather.
Yeah, I agree with that. So first impression obviously was a good one. And so when y'all started working here, obviously y'all saw the potential of what it could be. Like you said, kind of working through COVID and the various things that we kind of dealt with. We're kind of jumping into this new kind of year, almost like a fresh start almost. What do you think as far as your experience has been, and where do you think it's going to go from here?
We'll say it is nice to see people kind of coming out of the woodwork. I worked over across the bay in Mobile for a long time, and it's this year that I'm finally starting to see a lot of familiar faces from over there, kind of coming out and getting more comfortable with being around other people.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting just kind of trying to gauge that and making sure that we're still offering a comfortable and safe environment for guests,
right,
while still, like drawing a crowd.
Yeah. So, with this bar program, how would you describe it, and kind of what makes it unique, in particular to kind of other places you've been, and that type of thing?
I think there's great authenticity to this bar program in that you call yourself Garden of Glass, you call yourself sustainable. We can actually walk out and pick the Satsuma from the tree, or the Meyer lemon, or the cucumber, or the mint, and those freshness of ingredients, you cannot fake that in terms of then putting that in a cocktail.
Right.
With fresh juices, pick that day, just on the culinary side as well. Exact same thing. You can't fake freshness. When you talk to the guests about where certain things are planted, your knowledge of the property, that seals the deal for them. Especially if they then get to then go take a walk and see exactly what you were talking about. Right. It makes that drink you just served them, or whatever they're eating, like that much better.
Yeah. And
it's very gratifying to be on the other end of that, serving the stuff and seeing those reactions.
Yeah, I think the farm side of this is ever evolving for sure. We're kind of dialing in more, the things we're growing, kind of getting more particular about things we want to see grown, utilizing our hydroponics to the fullest, growing things that maybe are not particularly grown well here, and kind of just figuring those things out. It's definitely a work in progress. All right, so I want to jump into introducing these Garden of Glass cocktails that we have for the episode. Raleigh, I'll let you start with yours.
Sure. I made an Eastside Cocktail, so this is what I would consider a modern classic. It was created in New York by a guy named George Delgado in 2004. Now, he worked at a place called Libation. It was then sort of stolen, maybe, and in the cocktail world, that happens all the time, and then brought to Milk and Honey, probably 2006, around that time. And basically, this is a great fit for the Hope Farm. It's not on our menu, but it utilizes a lot of the things we grow here. So we're starting with fresh ingredients. We got cucumbers that we recently harvested. I chopped those up and muddled it. We grow our own mint. We have 2 different mint beds that we use. Muddled that fresh as well. We juice fresh limes, a little bit of that in there, some simple syrup, and then I used Plymouth gin, which is a style of gin from England. So as far as flavor profile, it's going to be kind of like a gimlet on the sour side in terms of groups of cocktails, but the mint and cucumber just kind of bring this freshness and sweetness to it.
Yeah, it's delicious. For sure.
You could definitely have a few of those.
Definitely. What about you, Danny?
So this is called Babylon, and inspired by the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Walking across the property, you do see a lot of, foliage, and it just kind of brought that to my mind when I went to pick the Satsumas. So with this, we have little tiki bitters, some vanilla syrup. We've got a London dry gin, and then we've got some fresh squeezed Satsuma juice. But the idea with this is like truly Garden of Glass. We're going out there picking it, juicing it that day. But it's got a kind of like a creamsicle type of vibe to it, really crisp, refreshing, easy to pound, 2 or 3 of those back to back.
Yeah. Is it that tiki bitters? Is that like kind of what kind of gives it that feel to it?
So there's a bar spoon of allspice dram in there.
Okay.
And that, along with the tiki bitters, kind of brings out that spice element.
Right. I know, like with cocktails, there's this whole experiential side of it. I mean, it's like the glass it's served in, how it makes you feel when you're holding it, drinking it. There's mouthfeel. There's obviously how it makes you feel. There's all these various aspects that go into kind of creating cocktails. When you're sitting here and you're like, in your head and you're thinking about the various things that you could put into a cocktail and wonder what it would taste like, what's the steps of kind of creating that creative process for y'all?
Lots of failure, trial and error, definitely more than anything. But
I would say experience is a great help. So you get the trial and error behind you in terms of knowing what flavors go together, and then that really frees you up to have a clean theme, and to go along with whatever theme your bar program is running. So we know that we want fresh ingredients, and then we can just have a pick of the litter in terms of, should I make a sour? Should I make a stirred drink? What sort of liquor should I use as a base? Right. We grow our own thyme and rosemary. We've got lots of edible flowers, tarragon as well. Like, tarragon and maybe a spritz go together. And all the trial and error, most of the trial and error, let me correct myself, is behind us at this point. We've been doing this for a little while.
Right.
So then it's, you get to the point where it really becomes fun.
Yeah. So it's like obviously it's never ending. It seems like once you kind of dedicate yourself to kind of this type of craft, like it's limitless as far as like the creativity of it.
And the thing that experience kind of gives you is that template. So, all that trial and error, like you start to understand the components of a cocktail and whether or not something truly belongs in that cocktail. So you don't want to put meaningless ingredients inside of a drink,
Right.
It's also really fun being surprised.
Yeah.
Putting things together, and then someone makes some off comment. Hey, maybe try this. And you're like, oh, nah. And then you try it, and you're like, oh man, that makes it way better.
Right. So, obviously there's been this re-emergence of like craft cocktails. I don't know how far back it goes. I'll let y'all kind of talk about that. But obviously it went from kind of this 1-in-1 Jack and Coke kind of real basic thing to like people really enjoying this craft cocktail. It's like an art form. They're kind of coming for the experience. When did that start? Kind of bring us along that historical kind of path.
Well, I think it kind of happens in waves, but most recently within the past 15, 20 years, you would agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like the birth of gastropubs, microbreweries, people getting back to creating artisanal products where they create things from scratch, brand them themselves, less mass distribution. The cocktail scene definitely evolved around that same sort of theme. I would say for me, in terms of reading certain books and gaining knowledge on the subject, Dale DeGraff is an amazing starting point. So we call him King Cocktail, as he's known. He basically was the bar manager of the Rainbow Room, which is part of the Four Seasons in New York. Four Seasons is a much older restaurant, but he was doing that in the 80s. And he was one of the first people to have a successful bar program that was world-renowned to bring back only fresh juices.
Gotcha.
As he could find them. It's a hell of a thing to try to juice a pineapple, but basically he's the blueprint. And other places like Milk and Honey by Sasha Petrovsky or the Pegu Club by Audrey Saunders, both in New York as well. They've kind of modeled just that simple theme of authenticity, fresh ingredients.
Right.
And then from there, every even small cities now have garden to glass or at least craft cocktail bars.
Right.
So, and as far as it's definitely it's sort of a niche scene, right? It's definitely sort of a hipster thing as well.
Right.
But I think at this point, it's evolved and matured enough to where it's just accepted.
Yeah.
That's the standard.
Right.
If you're going to call yourself a craft cocktail bar, fresh ingredients, and a clear sort of theme and purpose.
It's essential, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, whenever I'm going any city I'm going to, I'm trying to find the place that's creating cool cocktails.
Yep.
Obviously, I think anybody in our age range, or even, Dad nowadays, he's kind of gotten into the cocktail scene. He's obviously a big wine drinker, but when we travel, it's always seeking out the coolest spot that has the creativity and all that you can go experience.
Yeah.
So you kind of touched a little bit, but the historical origins of the various ingredients in cocktails. I know we talked a little bit before this podcast about oleo saccharum and shrubs and cordials and things. Kind of where do they play into this reemergence of the craft cocktail scene?
I would say the sustainability factor, and just truly utilizing those ingredients to their fullest extent. The fun part with the saccharum is that you add the sugar to those peels without, trying to get minimal pith in there. Right. But it draws out all the oil from the brines. I think sugar is hypertonic. So it absorbs moisture really easily. Hypo, one of the two. Right. But it absorbs the moisture really easily. So, when we go to juice our lemons and limes, for example, we'll take the spent rinds, add a little sugar to it, and extract all that oil.
Yeah.
One thing that we've found is that it's really not that hard to be sustainable.
It's cool
if you're like actively trying.
Right.
Yeah. The idea of throwing things away is actually a fairly new idea. The idea of not being sustainable. You have all these types of things that we drink. Anything from you have tinctures and cordials, shrubs, amari, all those different bittering agents and liqueurs from Italy. The origins of all of those were proprietary herbal blends that they would go in apothecaries, would either have gardens behind them or they would go in forage rather, for the ingredients. So the idea of like using ingredients to their fullest extent, not throwing things away, and truly being garden to glass, we're just trying to return to that. Like we're just trying to return to like how things should be.
That's cool.
And it's a huge benefit that guests get to have their experience benefited too.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. I know you talked about like tinctures and bitters and things like that. I mean, a lot of that stuff we can make in house. I know I saw, I was introduced, I'd never heard of it before, the Yama Tower, and the various things that we can do with that. I know we utilize that a good bit. What do you know anything about like the history behind the Yama Tower? Is that fairly new design of things, or is that something that's been around a while?
I don't know. It's kind of a niche thing for some craft cocktail bartenders, but as far as like its history, it's made for coffee. So it's made for, concentrated cold brew coffee.
Right.
However, it lends itself very easily to, infusing various liquors. 5 to 6 passes of that, you should be able to infuse just about anything into whatever spirit you'd like.
That's cool. It's nifty. So, all right. So when someone walks in the door here and they come up to the bar and they're like, hey, look, they look at our menu and they say, look, just recommend me something. What's the first step? I mean, do you ask them kind of what they're used to drinking and kind of go from there? Do you kind of get them to step out of the box? What's the process?
Definitely gauging what they like. I feel like you save yourself a lot of time if you just flat out ask them like, well, what do you generally like to drink?
Right.
I usually ask lighter or darker.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of, opens up that spectrum a bit to give them a little more option. However, if you're busy, like the faster you can get that answer, the better.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll give them a good look up and down about 3 times. figure them out a little bit.
Yeah.
Quick awkward stare.
Right.
But yeah, basically exactly what Danny said. Rather than just being like, "What do you like?"
Yeah.
Because they asked you because you're the expert, right?
Sure.
I'll just kind of gauge. I'll be like, "What are you craving? Are you you guys just starting out? Are you just here for drinks? You want to do an aperitif?
Right.
You want to do something light and bright?" If it's after dinner, I'll be like, we have cognacs, we've got liqueurs. Like, what do you want to sip on? You want some port?
Right.
And then that gets them out of their box a little bit. You throw these terms out they might not be aware of beforehand, and you get to talk to them. And of course, we're bartenders, so we're making other drinks and we're doing other things while we're doing this. But
Sure.
That's what makes the job fun. Yeah.
What's your go-to drink?
Negroni. 100%.
Yeah, I love a Negroni. What about you, Danny?
Daiquiri. Yeah.
I know we have one on the menu right now that's kind of a play on a daiquiri. What's that one called?
Age of Aquarius.
Yeah, that one's delicious.
It is the age of Aquarius.
Yes, it was a running joke from when we opened last year, and we finally realized it on the cocktail menu.
So I guess, all right, I'm curious, you talk about, there's this term mixologist. I don't, for someone that doesn't know the difference, is there a difference between a mixologist and a bartender, or is it kind of the establishment? Is it the quality of what you're creating, or is there not much of a difference between the two?
Well, I mean,
as far as just vernacular goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been an interchangeable term past the last 100 years.
Yeah.
Personally, I think what we do here, as far as like the bar and restaurant aspect, lends itself more towards being a bartender, because you are catering to the needs of your guest. In addition to, making really fun libations, you're also, taking into mind that you are like tending to these guests.
Right.
But honestly, I think it's just people and their personal preferences.
Right. Yeah.
I think it might kind of might be a term that its origin might be from outside of the bar, as in like it's good for guests to distinguish the difference as far as where they are. Right. You walk into a dive bar, that's not a mixologist, that's a bartender.
Right.
But as far as within the profession, what we think of ourselves, anybody behind the bar that I know that's worth their salt calls himself a bartender. But if a guest wants to refer to me as a mixologist, that's fine too.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah. It's kind of whatever. So how is it different to work kind of in a restaurant forward bar as opposed to just kind of a strict bar, cocktail bar? Obviously there's, like you kind of touched, you got to take care of the guests. There's a whole other aspect to it. Sometimes you're taking tables and you're actually waiting and serving food and that type of thing. I mean, kind of how does it differ?
Well, I mean, from traditional bartending, you just got a lot more going on. I think it also just kind of sharpens your focus on guest interactions. When you're just bartending, you just want to get something in that person's hand and get them out of your face,
right?
For all intents and purposes. If you're like in the middle of a rush, so to speak, but generally, you're going to have more time with these people, more one-on-one interactions. And I think, obviously if you've been here, you can definitely tell when you're sitting at the bar top that it's a lot of familiar faces,
right?
And they're there for a reason. And it's because we are, offering them an elevated experience.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you're making them cocktails, but you're also the whiskey expert. You're the local Scotch expert, cognac, 20 different wines by the glass. Right. So in terms of how the job is different, I think it forces you to be better at a restaurant.
Yeah.
But I think the rewards are better too. Greater as well.
Become a jack of all trades.
Yep. Right.
Master of some.
Right. There you go. So obviously we have a huge wine program here. We like to push that on top of our cocktails too. But, I know Raleigh, you and Danny both have some knowledge on the wine side of things. How does that play into, working here and kind of how you interact with the guest? Is it something that...
So with the addition of wine in our program,
yep,
and it being a huge focus, I view it as a huge benefit behind the bar for this reason. When servers are serving their tables, and this is also why I'm a bartender, not a server, they have a certain amount of resources. They've got a bag with very few tricks for the table. You have your personality, and you have your professionalism. But other than that, you are at the mercy of the kitchen. You are at the mercy of the bar to get those drinks out. A bartender has your professionalism and your candor and your good looks. But you also have all the bottles behind you to help you. You have all the wine behind you. You have everything else that can help the guest experience. You have an arsenal of things. And so I view the addition of wine and maybe a little something more involved in a classic cocktail bar to be a great value to me, being able to serve the guests.
Right.
For sure.
Cool. Do y'all have any books in particular that you would recommend to someone to read if they were kind of trying to get into this and wanted to kind of see it, kind of strive for this to be a career for them?
Yeah.
Which ones would you recommend? If you had to pick, a couple.
I'll just say the first two I read were Dave Wondrich's his Imbibe book.
Okay.
Now this is more storytelling, with a little bit of science in there, history of distillation, but he does great sort of mini sort of stories about drinks and then the founders of those drinks, how they were used, certain stories of certain hotels, all the way through to the modern era. That's in terms of getting inspired, right, to learn more.
It's a great book for just having talking points as far as like history is concerned.
Right.
This cocktail came from this bar or hotel, what have you.
And as far as the actual profession, being behind the bar, Meehan's Bar Manual is another
Absolutely.
indispensable resource.
Gotcha.
for bartenders, like figuring out how to do your job better, be more organized, like certain standards that should not be forgotten about.
So it's like specific to the profession itself.
And then one that's specific to us would be Garden to Glass Cocktails by Mike Wolf.
Yes.
He was the opening bar director of Husk in Nashville. And it just gives a lot of insight into, changing a bartender's mentality to be more aware of those ingredients that are readily available to you, kind of cultivating that cocktail from the ground up,
Right. Yeah. Whenever I was looking at I was trying to come up with a name for this podcast. I was Googling and making sure that, no one had already come up with it. And I came across that book and then ordered it and started reading it.
It's a good read.
Yeah, dude. It's pretty inspiring. So as far as, how you see a bartender's role in the community, the relationships, and managing the regulars, kind of what's the process there?
I would say just disarming them as soon as they walk through that door each time, they know that they're walking into a comfortable situation. I think it lends us a lot of leeway with our guests, if we do run into those, inconsistencies with the kitchen or what have you, just all the things that happen on a nightly basis,
Right.
They're a lot more gracious, because they understand that at the end of the day, they are going to have that positive experience and they will be back.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, nothing really further to add. Nailed it.
Yeah. I mean, regulars, I guess, are like the ones you want to see come in the door,
right?
Just because of that.
Well, I mean, like you develop relationships with these people,
right?
You're privy to the 100%. Finer details of their life, Right.
You walk into a cocktail bar, it's what fabulous drink can I make you?
Yeah.
You're talking about the drink and you're talking about yourself. You walk into a restaurant, it's hello there. Good to see you again.
Right.
Way more relationship centered.
Yeah, for sure. All right. What about the opposite of that? Like whenever you come in and there's, maybe an awkward guest or one that is kind of quiet, kind of what's your icebreaker move?
It's tough. I mean, it's very situational.
Yeah. Generally, he just has to smile at them.
Right. Yeah. That's all Danny has to do.
I don't know, just kind of gauging where they're at, asking. It doesn't hurt to ask too many questions. Just kind of feel out where they're at as far as understanding the menu is concerned.
Right.
I like to ask, are you torn between anything? Because that kind of gives me like a little leeway to figure out which direction we're kind of going in.
Right. I always like coming up to you and asking you to do a variation on some random cocktail, and you always have something going. So, where do y'all think the future of, I guess, craft cocktails is headed? I mean, obviously we're kind of getting back, like you said, to the roots of things, like with that garden to glass aspect of things. What do you think the next 10, 20 years looks like in this industry?
An emphasis on classics, but with a gastronomical approach is what I've noticed a lot of lately.
Yeah.
Just, people using various smokes, infusions, kind of world's your oyster in that one.
Right. A lot of molecular science.
Very true.
Foams and things.
I definitely view we've plateaued, and the entire movement I don't think is going to in terms of the mass of the movement is going to move very much. We're going to see a lot of different offshoots, and I think we're already seeing that with CBD cocktails.
Right.
There's entire bars now dedicated to non-alcoholic drinks. There's a bar, I want to say in Colorado, that's just mocktails.
Interesting.
That's it. And they have food.
Yeah.
And they do amazing job. They do an amazing job.
Yeah.
Tons of different shrubs, cordials, everything is homemade. You're definitely going to see some extremes branching out.
Right.
But I think as far as where the majority of bartenders and guests want to be is just getting back to the classic basics for sure. In terms of ordering reliable drinks from reliable people that are kind of like very true in purpose and theme.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. I know we have some mocktails on our menu that were created, and I think putting them on the menu themselves kind of allows people to feel more comfortable if they're not, a drinker. They still want to kind of just be social and not really be asked like, why aren't you drinking or whatever it may be. You can order one of these things and it's kind of under the radar.
They can get their fun, fruity, and delicious
That's right.
Without the booze.
Or if you're pregnant, you know, like my wife, she gets to order a cocktail and still enjoy at least most of the aspects of the cocktail, except for the part that I love the most. But all right, I'm gonna do some rapid fire questions. Y'all ready?
Let's do it.
All right, bitter or sweet?
Bitter.
Bitter.
Appetizers or dessert?
Appetizers.
Apps.
I'm with you on that one. Beer or wine?
Beer.
Be both.
All right, PBR or High Life?
PBR.
Oof, my girlfriend will be upset with me, but High Life, champagne and beers.
Yes, sir. All right, chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Chocolate.
Shoes or flip flops?
Shoes. I don't want to see your feet.
Hoodie or sweater?
Hoodie.
Hoodie.
Yeah, I'm hoodie for sure. Hair gel or all natural?
All natural.
Oh, natural.
All right, that's it. Look at that. We know y'all just so much better now.
Right on.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate y'all being on the podcast. It was fun. I'm excited for the future. And 2022 is gonna bring some fun things, and I'm glad y'all are part of it. So
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
yeah,
Thank
man.
you, dude.